Welcome to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, where we sit down with the people who give shape, texture, and voice to life on the North Fork of Long Island. Some are rooted here by generations, others arrived by chance or choice, but all carry with them a piece of the story. We talk about what's changing, what's worth holding on to, and the currents of history, both quiet and loud, that run through this place. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi. For episode 152, we sit down with Marilyn White Corwin, a lifelong Greenport native whose family has been part of this town for generations. She talks about growing up in the village, her family's businesses, and the everyday life of a small village. Marilyn reflects on the people, places, and traditions that shaped her, and shares her hopes for the future of Greenport, offering a heartfelt perspective on the life and history of this vibrant community. So I hope you enjoy episode 152 with Marilyn White Corwin. This episode was recorded May 29th, 2025. Thank you so much for coming on the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today. It's really great to have you on today.
Well, it's my pleasure. It was I feel very honored to be asked. And my name is Marilyn White Corwin. I was born in Greenport in 1951. Now everybody knows how old I am. As was my mom before me. She was also born at East Long Island Hospital. My dad was actually born in his house on South Street, which he owned until he died. I could give you a little background of my family. The roots are pretty deep on both sides, actually. I could go, I guess, with my mother's family. Yeah, my great-grandfather his name was Vincenzo Santa Cruz. You'll hear a different pronunciation of Santa Cruz now. The younger generation, say Santa Croce, but my grandfather always said Santa Cruz. So I'm going to go with Santa Cruz. Anyway, so they called him Vincent. And he was born in Popoli, which is just a little ancient city outside of Rome, about half hour south of Rome. And he came to America. I even know the name of the ship. It was called the Colombo in 1893. And he landed in New York City. He stayed in New York and he worked until he was able to earn enough money to buy passage for his wife and at that time the 3 children. So he did that, and when his wife and 3 children came, they did have one more son. That was my Uncle Mike, and he was the first one that was born actually in the United States. Then they moved to Greenport, and the reason why was because, and I think I've heard other people talk about this on your podcast, Sage's Brickyard was huge, and it employed a lot of immigrants and a lot of people. So my great-grandfather came to Sage Brickyard and worked, and my grandmother was born, and the house that she was born in, because a lot of those, they had a whole bunch of little sort of houses, but the house she was born in was the bigger house, and it's still there. And I remember my mom, my grandmother, and I, because we knew the caretaker at the time, we went down so my grandmother could see, the house that she was born in. This is when she was in her 80s, so she was really thrilled by that. But anyway, so he worked in the brickyards, and then he earned enough money to eventually buy a house property on 5th Street in Greenport. So the house, what he did was he actually opened a grocery store in the cellar of the house. Because back then, I guess you could do whatever, I guess there were no zoning laws, but so he opened up this grocery store and then eventually built a grocery store with an apartment on upstairs, which is there now on 5th Street. It's the second house it's the brick building as you go down 5th Street on the right-hand side. And that was my grandfather and great-grandfather's grocery store. My grandfather, Henry Santa Cruz, he, after he got married, and he and his wife, and then that would be my mom and her 2 brothers, Jack and Henry, they all lived upstairs over the store for many years. So my great-grandfather, they were very smart because he earned money and he bought property. And the property that he bought, which, boy, I wish I had it now, was where Riverhead Building Supply is, where Silver Sands is. Mm-hmm. That was all owned by my great-grandfather.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, so, and then, things kind of, get sold off or whatever as the years go by. So my grandfather, Henry, then eventually my great-grandfather died. They sold the store to Mezzafaros because it was called Santa Cruz's and then it was called Mezzafaros, which was also another great Greenport, name. Yeah. So my grandfather built a house on Mill Creek, right on the water, and then that's where my grandmother and my two uncles and my grandfather moved into that house. My mother at that time was already out of the house because she went to become a nurse, and she went to Brooklyn Hospital, and that's where she did her training, and she was going to be a cadet nurse. Now, this is during World War II, okay? Mm-hmm. So had the war not ended when she finished her nurse's training, she would have been overseas as a nurse. Now, my dad was already over there, which we'll get into that, I guess. But anyway, So when my grandfather Henry, when he moved to the house, it's technically Southold, he started his own business, and it's called Jiffy Sanitation. And at that time, and it was a garbage removal, but he had this new truck. I mean, it was like sort of a state of the art, nothing. It wasn't like anything, like they do now where they compact the garbage and all that. It was just this new fancy truck. And he and my uncle Jack, they used to run the garbage routes in Greenport. They picked up for everybody. Mm-hmm. So that was what he ended up doing. And then I'm just trying to think here. So now my grandfather Henry also had two brothers. Well, he had a bunch of brothers, but two of his brothers, one was Mike and one was Tony. They opened up a bowling alley. Now, this is where I was listening to one of your other podcasts. So there were two bowling alleys in Greenport. The one that my uncles had was Santa Cruz's, and that was where Aldo's is now. And if you go into Aldo's, if you look, you could see how long that inside of that building is, because that was bowling alleys. So they had that bowling alley. And then there was another bowling alley, which would be where that new yoga place just opened up, and that was Scavoni's. He had bowling there, and he also had billiards, so that was pretty cool. Yeah. But anyway, that was back in the day. So they opened up. So they had the bowling alley, and so it was. That
was your grandfather.
That was my grandfather's brothers.
Yes.
Two of my grandfather Henry's brothers.
Okay.
Opened up the bowling alley. Yep. And then my grandmother, who was Yolanda Matosha, her father also worked in the brickyard. They came over from Italy. I don't know what year they came over. I'll have to really search that out. But they came over, and he also worked in the brickyards. And they couldn't say Matosha. So a lot of the names of the immigrants that came over, so they gave him a number. So my great-grandfather was number 5. So, I mean, okay, whatever, So, and he worked and then bought his house on 7th Street. And then that's where he lived with his wife, which was my great-grandmother, who I do remember. I remember going over. I was very fortunate that I did get to know her a little bit, And he was one of like 8 children. So they had a big family. And then, so my grandmother's brother, Nick, he opened up a barbershop in Greenport. And I'm trying to think of what's there now.
Is that where the post office?
Oh no, that was we had like 3 barbers in town, right? Where I think that might have been Leo Mezzo or one of them. Yeah, no, he was across the street. So maybe White Weathered Barn, or I'm not sure. Whatever, is that what's over there?
I think Weathered Barn,
or whatever. I can't keep track, but yeah, it's in that. It was in that area there.
There was a lot of Italian barbers.
He was, and he had a parrot, and that was the coolest thing. And he had and he had a chair that was like a horse, so the kid could sit on the little horse and get his hair cut. Yeah, that was my Uncle Nicky, and he was a great guy. And then, of course, her other brother, Albert Matosha, he ended up being a supervisor of Southall Town. So they did very well, came over here,
Yeah.
And then on the other side, my great-grandfather, now this would be my father's side, my great-grandfather, Benjamin Seaman. Now my grandfather was born in Hampton Bays, the white grandfather, but this was my grandmother's father, was Benjamin Seaman, and he was a keeper at the Point of Woods life-saving station, and that's a Fire Island. And my grandfather, whose name was Washington, because I guess my great-grandmother was a great admirer of George Washington, so she named her son Washington, and he worked there at the life-saving station. And that's how he met my grandmother, Grace. So Grace White. And then they moved to Greenport in 1910. Okay. And it was my grandfather and his brother, who was Arthur White, okay, came to Greenport.
Yes.
Now, and then my grandfather opened up, he had an oyster shop down at the end of Ludlam. What's down there now, I think, is tennis courts. So he had his oyster shops. He had about 8 boats, and I mean that's what they did. And I have pictures of just mountains of oyster shells. But my grandfather also, what he did was, because the big thing now is housing for your employees and all this kind of thing, which is true. It's a problem, but he bought up houses on Ludlam and Central Avenue. He owned about maybe 4 houses that he would house his employees in, which was great. So the guys that worked on the boats and the families, they got to live here.
That was in the 20s?
Yes, that was, no, it was before the 20s. Yeah, it would be in the 20s, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because he had it all through the 20s, so it was around, yes, I would say that would be around in the 20s. So then he bought, but the home that they lived in, he had the oyster shop, but then they lived in a house on South Street. Okay, and that's, like I say, the house my father was born, okay, was on South Street, because then they had, they had their baby's home, I guess. So then in 1933, my grandfather decided to, I guess, get out of the oyster business, and he bought the store, which was formerly known as Washington White Sons Hardware, it would be two stores up from Preston's. So go all the way down the end of foot of Main Street, and then you have Preston's, and they have a couple of stores, and then it used to be Sonny Glickman's lawyer, Stanley Corwin, and Sonny Glickman had a lawyer's office there, and before that it was a bakery. But anyway, and then my father's store. So the American Legion was upstairs in that store before it was over. Yes, it was there, but I believe that it was someplace also in between, but at the time, the American Legion was upstairs. So the store, and if you look at the building now, you can see how it kind of worked. Because the store, there was like a door that went straight in, and then that was just stairs that brought you right upstairs. So you couldn't go to the left, you couldn't go to the right. And so like on the left-hand side, there was like a plumbing shop. On the right-hand side, there was fish and hardware type stuff and all that. So it was actually 3 stores in one. Wow. So then eventually, my grandfather started the hardware store, which went on for many, many, many years. And then when my father got out of the service, he went and worked in the store with his brother Ken White, and then my grandfather retired, and they took over the store. And then Ken retired, and my father took over the store, but until he retired in 1991. And then my father sold the business, but kept the building. And I just recently sold the building to my cousin because I wanted to keep it in the family.
Yes.
But it was just getting to be too much for me to keep up with. So, so it's still in the family, that building there. But yeah, my family was very involved in a lot of things, civically.
Within the village of Greenport? In
the village, they loved the village. They absolutely loved the village. And my father was, he was president of this library at one time. My mother was president of the Friends of the Library. They were involved in the Historical Society. They were on the board for more years than I can remember. They're both involved in the Railroad Museum. My father was on the hospital board. My mother actually worked in the hospital as a nurse for a little bit. There was, when they came back to raise their family here, they definitely volunteered. My mother was responsible for all those cherry blossom trees because she was on the. So I'm sorry if the other ones have to clean them up, but they are pretty though.
Yes.
But she and Mr. Tapper and Al Herzog. Al Herzog at the time was superintendent of the highways here, in the village, and Mr. Tapper, who owned the store where Rose and Dee's Jewelers is right now, which would be, where that is, sort of across from Frisky Oyster.
Yes.
Yeah, that used to be Mr. Tappert's, and he had like a stationery store there. But he also had, what do you call it? With did it when they do the telegraph. I couldn't think of it. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, he also had the telegraph office there. It was kind of cool. You'd go in there and they'd be doing the Morse code and whatever they were doing or I don't know. He had ticker tapes. He had all kinds of stuff. So yeah, that was Mr. Tapper. But anyways, Mr. Tapper put the money up to buy all these trees, and they planted them all over the village. And I mean, look how beautiful, Yeah. So there's a lot of little things like that going on. But my father, when he was in high school, he signed up to go into the service, to the Army, much to my grandmother's, oh boy. So the minute he graduated, now we got a war going on, off he goes. So he was in General Patton's army. He was in the Battle of the Bulge.
Wow.
And I have, because I have their house, and I have found letters upon letters that like he had sent back to my grandmother, and letters that my mom sent to him, and then he sent to her. So it's quite historical for me because, it's funny how they didn't talk about all that stuff. I would have loved to. Now there's so many questions I have that I'm not going to get answers for, I mean.
Did you think of asking at that time? No,
and I can tell anybody that's listening, if you have a mother or a father, ask them questions, just the dumbest things, but ask them because, I mean, I did a little tape thing of them, just like, because they met when they've been together since they were 15 years old. Okay. And I wanted to get the whole from the very beginning because they both went to Greenport school, and they met each other at school, and they started going together and stuff. And then, like I say, then my father went into the Army, and my mother was still here because she was a senior in high school, and he was in his basic training. And I found those letters. It's heartbreaking, Yeah. I mean, because they'd been together a few years before he had to go. Then there he goes, And but it was, it's just amazing, to see. And then, luckily, he made it through okay, and when he got home, and then she got her RN, her nurse's training, and then they got married, here at St. Agnes. My grandchildren are fifth generation of St. Agnes Church, and which is pretty cool. No, actually, no, they're sixth generation of St. Agnes Church, and my granddaughter, who just graduated last year, was fifth generation of Greenport School. Wow. So yeah, we do go back a ways. We do go back a ways. But so they got married. They settled here. We lived actually at first in one of my grandfather's houses, upstairs apartment on the corner of Ludlam and Carpenter, and it was just and it was myself and my two brothers, and we were all very close in age. So there was three little kids running around that apartment, and they were. I remember I mean, I remember hearing that who rented the apartment downstairs, or these these two old bachelors, and it was Veen Gafka who worked, and people who are from here are going to go, oh my God, I forgot about Veen. But Veen Gafka and his father lived downstairs, and they were older, and I could just imagine what it was like having three little kids running around screaming upstairs over his head, But, so we lived there until, I think it was like 54. They found the house on Fifth Avenue, which is the house that I do have now. And it's a beautiful old house built in the 1800s, a big house. And it was owned, at that time, they bought it from a Munsell, because Carol and I talk about this. And he was I believe he was a captain or something, because in the house, there's a lot of just like ornamental things that like you could see came off a boat, kind of stuff. There's a lot of like built-ins, and it's really beautiful. But yeah, so that's the house that that my brothers and I have two brothers, and that we grew up in, and just flourished in Greenport. We loved, we loved living here. I mean, as kids, I mean, it was just the best place in the world.
What activities would you do?
Well, every kid had his bike. And I was just talking to my friend, Maria Claudio. She and I have stayed close since we were little kids, and she lives in California now. And we were just talking about this, You remember as a kid, first thing you did, on Saturday, you'd get up in the morning, you'd hop on your bike, and then you'd go to your friend's house, or you'd go ride here or there or whatever. And there was always, kids in the neighborhoods, but there's not kids in the neighborhoods much anymore, or at least they're not out. You don't see them like it used to be,
No.
See, I went to Catholic school in St. Agnes, because St. Agnes had a Catholic school. But while they were building the school, all right, but let me just go back. So I went to kindergarten and first grade in the public school, okay, because there was no Catholic school yet. And they were building the Catholic school over on 6th Street. And there's a house, and it was called Mother Macaulay Hall. And if you look at the high school, okay, then heading east, the first house, that was Mezzafaro's, the old lady Mezzafaro, the grandmother, that was her house. Then there's a big house next to it. You can hardly see it. It's a big mansion. And that was, I guess the church must have owned it, and that was Mother Macaulay Hall. And that's where Maria and I were talking about. That's where we went to school, and my brothers, whatever, for at least a year while they were building that school. So then once the new school was built, then we went over there. So we went to Catholic school till 8th grade, because it went up to 8th grade. And then we graduated from 8th grade, and we got to go to the public high school. Oh my God. It was like the weirdest thing, because I felt like you could do anything you wanted, because it wasn't as strict as, because when in the Catholic school, we were all in one little room, and you stayed in that room the whole day, pretty much. You went down cellar and you did a little, whatever they did, gym kind of thing, which wasn't much of anything. But other than that, you were really like that. But when you went to the public school, and you changed classes, and you went here and you went there, and it was amazing. And you could just do so much. So I really enjoyed my high school years. I just loved it. I mean, getting involved in everything, and, having night football games and night track meets. And it just seemed like, and there wasn't a whole lot of kids. I mean, our school isn't that big, but, that's why, like, they have all class reunions now, because I know in bigger schools, I mean, a freshman wouldn't be caught dead hanging out with a sophomore, or vice versa. A sophomore wouldn't be caught dead, with a freshman. You know what I mean? You kind of, that would be. But in our school, because it was so small, everybody hung out with everybody. So you were friends with kids in other grades, and it's just what you did, So that's why when they started the all class reunions, it was a wonderful thing, because everybody knew everybody, and it's always a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, what we did pretty much, we'd go down street. Yeah. That's what we would call it, go down street. And, you'd go to Paradise. You'd go to Rouse's, which I'm sure you've heard those names plenty of times. And, or, I don't know, we go to the beach. You go to the end of, go to Darby's Dock, which would be the end of, the end of 5th Street. Because then, I don't know, you could go down the end of any street and jump in the water.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, pretty much,
It was open then. Obviously, now there might be more.
No, now
restrictions.
Now there's security guards. Yeah. No, it was really cool. And then again, my grandmother lived on the water.
Yes.
Because my grandfather bought the house on Mill Creek, so we spent a lot of time up there as kids. Because my father had bought the piece of property across the street, and we had this little, and then my uncle was building this new house, and he had this small little bungalow. Mm-hmm. So my father took the bungalow. I mean, it's so funny how they did all this, and moved the bungalow onto the property. And then we used to stay up there. It was like a little summer thing. And my father would just drive the 2 miles to work, but it was like you were in a whole nother place, and you made friends with the kids in that neighborhood. And yeah, it was good. And then also, so getting back into the village, we had a skating rink that was operational, all the time, which I'm glad they got that going again. And my father was extremely, and my mom involved in the American Legion also, and to help get all that going. And then we had the movies. So you would go to the movies on Saturday, and you'd go skating on Sunday, so there was always something to do. Yeah. It seemed like, but I don't know.
Did you go to were the bowling alleys still there?
Well, they were, yeah, but I was too young.
That was more for older.
A little bit older, I think. But they did have duck pins. So if you went in with your parents, they had these little balls with little duck pins. Because my uncle's ball now, they had the duck pins. And then my other uncle, Alvin Matosha, he had the Sportsman cigar store right next door to Aldo's, where the little school building is now. And that was kind of cool because, he had newspapers, he had everything in there. That was his, so it's like, between my family on my father's side and my family on my mother's side, I mean, I couldn't do anything because everybody saw everything you did.
They go back and talk to your parents.
Family was everywhere. You couldn't get away with anything. Yeah. No, it was really nice though. I mean, it was a nice feeling, to know that you have that security. But back then, and I think John Sullivan might have alluded to the fact that everybody watched out for everybody, pretty much. And everybody got along pretty much with everybody. I'm not saying everybody just loved everybody. I mean, it wasn't like that. But I'm just in the sense that we didn't care, if anybody was, we didn't even think about nationalities. We didn't think about color. We didn't think about any of that. Everybody it was just kids were kids and the adults were adults. And it was just a really nice, all our friends were just whoever they were, and you had everybody at your house and this kind of thing. And, there was a lot of that. I mean, but you see, then your mother was home. I think that had a lot to do with it, that you could have your friends over more because you weren't like a latchkey kid, where you, were kind of on your own. I mean,
you came home and no one was home.
Right. I mean, she'd be home to give you whatever, or, give you something to eat or, we used to come home because we lived so close to the school and stuff because we used to just cut cross lots, go up 6th Street and then come right because the neighbor behind us, we'd always cut through the yard and stuff. So we'd always come home for lunch, so she was home to make lunch for you and stuff like that. I think that's something that is lacking, it's sad. And then she always was there to prepare supper. We all sat down as a family to have supper together. And then if your friends were over, they came and had supper with you and all that. So it was nice.
Did you, because that's on your mom's side, that was Italian.
Yeah, they were Italians.
Was it?
It was crazy.
Was it? Did you have a lot of Italian food? And
she did. Yeah. She did. And it was funny because they always talk about the Italian grandmother that was such a great cook. Well, not mine. It was my grandfather that cooked. My grandmother, she was beautiful. I mean, she really was. And she had a voice, an operatic. I mean, matter of fact, my grandfather had bought one of those. This had to be in the what? Let me try to think here. I guess in the 40s. It's like they had the record player things that you could record, like a wax record or whatever it was. So that was like a recording thing. It was like a record player. And he made all these records of her singing. She actually was asked to try out at Metropolitan Opera because there was somebody out here that heard her because she used to sing a lot in the church. And when the servicemen would come home, they'd ask if she would do the mass and sing the Ave Maria for them and things like that. This was her thing. So somebody heard her and asked her, so she did do it, but she said, but no, she says, I have my 3 babies. She says, I'm not, but she had a beautiful voice. So I have a recording of her singing the Ave Maria. So she sang at her own funeral. Because when she died, I got the recording. I asked the priest, I said, can she sing at her funeral? And it was, oh my God, it was amazing.
Wow.
Yes, it was so cool. And she sang that Ave Maria, and people were like, oh, to get to hear her sing again. I mean, it's like, but you could hear it fine,
Yeah, that's amazing.
But that was fun. But that was my grandmother. But my grandfather cooked. And you got to remember, too, between my father's family and a lot of seafood, because we lived on the water, they lived on the water, and my grandfather would love, they'd go out, and my uncles, and they'd go what they call fire lighting. You go out at night with your lantern, and you'd get the crabs, because you could see them, skirting around, and we'd have crab feasts. They'd get big tables down in the cellar, and just put papers down, and then they cook those and just throw them all in the middle, and just, I mean, it was just fun. Eels, my grandfather used to love to, he did them however he did them, and they were really good. So, yeah, but my mother was the Italian cook.
Yes.
She did. Her food was so good. She loved to cook, and she cooked the best Italian meals. And Italians are noisy. So like we'd have everybody, and it's just like everybody talking, but it was great,
Yeah.
And my father was oh my God, he was such a sweet man, and he just goes with the flow, and because he was oh gosh, he was a wonderful man, and he and my mom, for all those years, they were married until they died,
Yes.
And they were always together, and then my grandfather, Wash White, he also had bought a house in Aquaborg. It's actually White's Lane. It's right off of the boulevard. It's almost to Riverhead, just off the boulevard in Aquaborg. And he had oyster beds on Reeves Creek there. So because then you could own land under the water, and that's where he had his oyster beds. And so then he had conveyor belts. He had a regular little industry going up there. And so whenever, like, the fire department, he belonged to the exempt fire department. It was a company of the older ones, and they'd have their picnics up there every year because it was such a beautiful, beautiful place. I came across a bunch of pictures. But, fire department. And my grandfather, Wash White, was also, he was a village trustee for Greenport, as was my father, so they, like I say, they did stay involved with a lot of things. My father was very involved with the fire department. That was like his second love. And he was chief when I was little. And he was chief for 3 years, which they usually did 2 years, but I don't know, for some reason he was chief for 3 years. And it was hard because, he really did it right. I find all these things. He kept records like you wouldn't believe of everything that went on, and equipment and this and that and the other thing. And he remained a fireman, active fireman. And he was the chief driver of his truck until he was 80 something. And then he said, I'm not doing this anymore because I'm capable, but if something happens, they're going to blame it because of my age, you know? And this is a funny little story, actually. It's just not funny that the house blew up, but the house, there's a house on Central Avenue. Yeah. And of all the weird things, it happened to be one that my grandfather owned a long time ago, but he didn't own it at the time. Anyway, and they had a propane explosion there. Now, my father, we only lived on Fifth Avenue, which is right up the street from the firehouse. So the alarm came in. So he jumps he's 80, whatever, jumps in the truck, right? He's the first truck there to this alarm, and there was a pumper. So, and then the other guys, of course, were there. But anyway, he was the first one there. So thank God, nobody got hurt. They put the fire out, all that. My daughter-in-law, who is also, she's a paramedic and she's also in the fire department. She was at this I don't know, some sort of thing up the island, some kind of a fire. I guess it was some sort of a class. They go to all these classes and stuff on explosions and all this. And she said, all of a sudden, they were talking about this explosion in Greenport. And then somebody said, yeah. And the first one on the scene was this 80-something-year-old fireman who was there before everybody. And so Norma, my daughter-in-law, she says, that was my grandfather, you know. But I mean, it's just so funny, you know, how these stories go. And
Wow.
yeah, because my son Bob, so I have twins. I have 2 boys. And Bob is very involved in the fire department, just like his grandfather. And so I never got involved in the fire department, even though my father really was, because my father did not agree with the women in the fire department.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
He didn't want you.
Old school. My
Yes.
father was old school. I never even asked because I knew, no, I wouldn't do that to him. But the funny, ironic thing about that is, so then his grandson marries Norma Kioski, another native. And she was born here, you know, same thing. Natives marrying natives. And she joined the fire department, got into my father's relief hose. That was his company. She was like the first woman in the relief hose. But then my father, he said, you know, I've gained a whole new respect now because she's amazing. And it's, you know, it's the old thinking, you know, of how, that's just how they were, you know, the men and women. It was, you know, you didn't, you know, but no, he said, yeah, I could see where it's a good thing, you know, but I just thought it was so ironic of all the ones, you know, the first one would be her, you know. Yeah. But yeah, and she's still very active.
And, I was just, because you said you met one of your great-grandparents.
My great-grandmother I knew.
Grandmother, but...
Matosha, yeah.
Did you get to meet both of your grandparents on both?
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely, because my grandfather, Henry Santa Cruz, he died when I was like 10. He was back then they smoked cigarettes and no one thought anything of it. Yeah. And he was very young. He was just like in his 50s. He died of lung cancer. But I did. I remember him very well. My grandmother was like 100 when she died. She and I were real close, you know, and I was an adult, you know.
But did they, because I mean, I know you mentioned even with your parents, but did you hear any stories or did they talk about anything about Greenport or what they thought of the area when they first came here, or just stories of? Well,
my grandmother Santa Cruz would talk about going to Oak Grove, which was, matter of fact, I think I heard Billy Lieblein mention it. It was down the end of 9th Street, and it was it must have been the coolest thing ever, you know, because she said that they used to go, the mothers would take the kids. This was in the middle of the day. And they'd go dancing. They must have had a band there during the day. I mean, how cool is that? The kids would be playing. You know, they had playgrounds and stuff there. The kids would be playing. And the adults would be in the house dancing, probably drinking. I don't know. But, you know, but it was just a really cool place. So she used to talk about that, you know. Yeah. My other grandmother, Grace White, she and my grandfather, they were, again, big on the water. And they both had I have pictures of them staying next to their sailboats. And so she used to love to go and sail. And then actually, go back to the other grandmother, Santa Cruz, Yolanda. She actually swam from Darby's Dock to Shelter Island. She swam across the bay there because she was a great swimmer. So they all were into the water and that kind of thing. But, you know, other than that, I don't really know what they did. They stayed home. My grandmother White was, she never would hear one bad word out of her mouth. You know, she was, but the other one, she was, my entire one, we always joke, that's where we learned the best language, but she was a pip. There was such a contrast, and I just loved them both so much, you know, but my grandmother White, I mean, she stayed home. She belonged to the Methodist Church, Red Group, and she'd have card parties at her house, you know, and she cooked these meals. She was another really good cook, different kind of, you know, cooking. Yeah. And she was a homemaker, you know, and she took her pride in all that, you know, and so that's pretty much, you know, what she did.
And what about even did your parents say anything about what they thought of Greenport growing up, or because people would talk about it, and I don't know if this is more in the early 1900s, but with the fishermen coming in and then a lot of bars and...
Yeah, no, there were. And yeah, during World War II, we had, I believe it was the Picket Patrol, and which was because they had to patrol all these waters because the German boats were coming from everywhere. And so we had a lot of military, presence in the village and stuff like that. So, I mean, I've seen some letters that my mother wrote to my father about, all these servicemen and stuff. But they did the same thing. They'd go to the movies. They talked a lot about that. They just go and hang out at the beaches with their cars. It's just a simple life.
Yeah.
It was just, and they'd go and I don't know what they did so much, but they seemed to be very content.
Yes, definitely.
I mean, when I was a kid, we lived on Fifth Avenue, and it was different because my mother also was a smoker until my brothers and I became teenagers, and then she just did not want us smoking, so she went cold turkey, thank God, and she stopped smoking. So she, she was right. But she'd send us down to Kaplan's Market, just to get her cigarettes, for 50 cents a pack or whatever it was, and whatever. It was just a simple time. Like nobody bothered that you bought cigarettes. I mean, we weren't going to smoke them. We bring them to the parents, And then, I remember going to Kiski's. That was it's right across from the movies, and it was a butcher shop. And Bruno Kiski and his wife Alice, and I don't know why I remember that, but I do. And I remember the sawdust on the floor and all that. And you'd go in, and so my mother would give you some money and say, "Go down to Kiski's and get a steak." Okay. So then you'd go in and you'd say to Mr. Kiski, you'd say, "Oh, my mom wants a steak," and then he'd go, "Indoor or outdoor?" Because if it was going to be barbecued, he'd make it a little thicker. If it was going to be inside, I mean, it was just like, wow. Yeah, it was so cool. And then you'd want some hamburger or whatever, ground beef. You'd see them, they cut those chunks out and put it in that big grinder, and you'd see it all come out all fresh in one of those little cardboard, things that they used to put the meat in. And yeah, that was always fun, to be able to do that.
Nice to see those mom and pop stores before the A&P and
but every neighborhood had it.
Yes. Were there kind of were there little delis in each neighborhood? Well, not delis.
No, but they were just little grocery stores, and you could get meats and stuff like that. I mean, because Kaplan's, I remember in the back he had this, meat. You could get meats, and then of course my grandfather had it, but then it was Mezzafaro's over on 5th Street. They had a store on 6th Street. It was Tuttle's. They had a store. It was Goodings. It was Tuttle's. So there was a store over there. I'm trying to think of where else now. And then of course up by Champlain, which would be on the way to Gull Pond. They had Rouse's had a grocery store there. They had the best ice cream. And I'm trying to think where else, but yeah, the neighborhoods had their own little stores, which was nice.
Yeah,
it was very handy.
And you could do all your shopping here. You wouldn't have to go today. You got to go to Riverhead for something.
Yeah, no, right. But we always had an A&P here, as far as I remember. There was always an A&P, and then Bohack came in. Well, yeah, Bohack was on the corner of
where the
Main
hotel is.
Well, no, it's where Mills's building is. Where the blinker light is on the corner of Main and front and Main.
Yeah,
it's that big building where what was it? Creations by Lisa or something was in there.
Oh, okay.
That was Bohack, and then Mills bought that building, and that was the Mills building after that. But we had a lot of we had a lot of stores. I mean, you could get anything.
The arcade was there.
Well, you had the arcade, you had Hockeye's, which was another variety store. You had Jagger's. So we actually had 3 where you could go. Like you said, now if you need a spool of thread, where the heck? Thank God for Amazon. And I hate to say that. Yeah. My father was in business here, and he depended on people buying. And I get that, but I can't pay $85 for a T-shirt. I'm sorry.
Mm-mm.
I don't care what it says on it.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
but
too much.
no, I'm just saying, you know, I would love to see
Support like local businesses. And,
yes,
yeah.
and I try. I
Yeah.
swear I do, but
Yeah, it's
you
hard.
know, it's getting harder and harder. But we did, and yeah, men's stores, just men's clothing. We had Abby Levinson had one right across the street from my father's, and then across the street from him. But this is the thing too. Like the competition, like now, if somebody has a store here and somebody's going to open up sort of the similar store, they start pitching a fit.
Yeah.
You know, and try to block it and all this stuff. My father had the hardware store, and Vans had the hardware store only about four stores down on the same.
Yeah, because they said there were two hardware stores.
There was, and it was Vans and my father and Bernie Van Poprin, they were best of friends. They got along so well, and they would discuss things like Bernie would carry things that my father didn't have. And my father was more like heavy hardware, like things for the boats. Like the boats would come, we had all the boats come in, and they'd come in and they'd get all their stuff, you know, that they had to, you know, use for the boat, the hardware for the boats, you know, for the nets and the, you know, all their links and this and that and all this. So that kind of stuff he had. Bernie had, you could go in and you could get a toaster, and you could get, you know, household things like that. Bernie sold wallpaper. My father was Benjamin Moore paint strictly. And he was the only Benjamin Moore dealer. And Benjamin Moore was very good about that. I don't even think Riverhead had it at that point. They wouldn't let anybody else have the Benjamin Moore until my father went out of business, you know. But they worked together very well. And the same thing with the men's clothes. You had Abby Levinson on the west side of the street, and right across the street was Abe Brown. And he was on the east side of the street, and they both did men's clothing. And then, of course, Katz's had men's clothes and women's clothes. You know, so I don't know. There just seemed to be enough for everybody.
And this was in the 50s and 60s?
Yeah, I would say, yep.
But was there a time, because this was probably even when you coming out of high school, were you seeing some of the businesses starting?
In the 70s, yeah, because I graduated in 70.
Oh, okay.
And yes, the businesses were closing. That was probably the leanest time around here. You know, when these businesses started closing.
Yeah. But you noticed just like more empty storefronts at that time.
Yep. And then, you know, we'd get these little stores that would come in, and then they'd go, and, you know, I don't know. It's like, I think if you get a business that's something like substantial that people really need, you'll do well, you know, I hope. But maybe not. Maybe it's different now, because you can just go on your computer and order from Amazon and have it tomorrow.
Yes.
You know, and maybe that's what's hurting things, you know. Yeah. And like you say, if you don't mind going to Riverhead, what's not in Riverhead? I mean, everything, you know. Yes. So it's tough.
Yeah.
You know, it really is. I think it's very tough having a business right now, unless you have something unique. Like now, like we had rented the store to Kim from Harbor Pet. And see, hers is sort of a unique business, because where else can you go and get your dog washed and clipped and buy all kinds of really cool, you know, things for your dogs. Plus, she has a bakery there, and they bake their own biscuits and things for the dog. You know, so she's got a lot of unique things. So she's doing well. Yeah. You know, but.
And the Harbor Pets is where White's.
Yes, because we rented to her. Best tenant ever. And so my cousin now rents to her too, you know, and I told them, I said, she's like awesome, you know. Yeah, she's really, really good. And she has a good business. Mm-hmm. But you know, but you can't, if you're going to open up something, make it be something, I hate to keep using the word substantial, but I can't think of anything else. Yeah. You know, something that people are going to need, or, you know, whatever. But.
No, it's tough, but, and then I was curious, in high school, did you have any favorite teachers or subjects from?
You know what, it's funny, because as I get older, because I was sort of a bit of a hellraiser in school, so, you know, it's like, and because I think it was because I got all that freedom after coming out of Catholic school, I don't know, but, I mean, I wasn't bad, but,
and
you know,
think
just
like
mischievous.
The teachers might have been Were they stricter in the Catholic?
Oh, heck yeah.
Compared to when they probably were a little more laid back.
Oh, yeah. What? Yeah, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind. So you kind of can get away with a lot more. But so in later years, I just think back, I feel so bad because like Mr. Burlingame, he was the sweetest teacher on earth. Why did I give him such a hard time? It's like, you have these stupid regrets, But yeah, I enjoyed it. I had good friends there and, I tried to, be involved in a lot of extracurricular stuff and, all that. And then what I did was I did when you were a senior, you could do this work-study thing where you could get out of school like at 1:00 as long as you were going to a job. Mm-hmm. So I worked down at S.T. Preston's and in the catalog department. And it was really cool because, my gosh, the catalogs that they would send out, hundreds and hundreds.
Thick, yeah.
But they so many of them.
Yeah.
And so they had like this, it was like, I felt like I was working in the post office because I'd get the labels, I have to label the talking with the hands. I'd have to label the catalogs and then put them in the different states where they're going to go and all that, and so I did that. I did that until I graduated. And then after I graduated, I kept working down there. Mm-hmm. Because I got married right after I graduated. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to stay here. I wanted to get married. I wanted to have kids, So I got
pretty much coming out of high school. That's what you were set on.
Getting married.
Yes.
And I had a boyfriend. He was old. He's old. I still have him. I guess he's my husband. So, so I guess I still have him. 54 years.
Were you in the same class?
No, he's like almost 5 years older than me.
Okay.
Yeah, he's older. He was. I kind of knew him. My brother sort of hung out with him, and so it was funny because we grew up in the same town, but I never knew him because he lived in Cardboard City. So he lived on the other side of Front Street. I didn't go over that side too much. I was on this side, so I didn't really hang out over there. So I didn't. And then he graduated from high school, got drafted, went to Vietnam, came home, worked, whatever. And then I eventually did meet him when I was a senior in high school, but he had been out of school. He graduated in 1965. Mm-hmm. So he'd been out of school quite a few years. Mm-hmm. And we just started, and he had a fast car. Oh, and I was, and I was like a little motorhead. So that was like a really big attraction too. So anyway, we just did our, whatever you do, when you're a teenager, and he'd come pick me up because I was, like I said, I was still in high school. He'd come pick me up after school and all this kind of thing. Then about a year later or so, we got married at St. Agnes. And then about a year after that, we had our twins, 2 boys. And my husband was very into sports, loved sports, And so he was excited about having the 2 boys. Mm-hmm. Not that girls don't do sports, but back then girls, I played basketball and stuff, but you couldn't do anything. The way the girls had to play basketball, it was ridiculous. Only forwards could shoot. You could only go half court. I guess they thought we were delicate or something. I don't know, because they wouldn't let us run the whole court. It was craziness. But now, because we have a granddaughter there. She's amazing in sports and she's amazing in basketball and all that. So things are different. But anyway, so my twins were born here in East Long Island Hospital, and they were born on February 29th. Mm-hmm. So they get a birthday once every 4 years. And they were, I believe, from what I think they were the only leap day twins born in that hospital. And it was a matter of a month or so after they were born, that's when they closed down the maternity ward. So nobody else could be born in that hospital anymore, which is kind of sad,
Yes.
So they were, generations of us. And then, so then they both went to Greenport School, same thing. And both graduated in 1990. And they, my son Everett was head basketball coach for many years at Greenport High School. He's now the head for the boys, and he's doing head coach for the girls. So he was very involved in that. And my son Bob's so involved in the fire department, and it's funny because they both work. My son Ev works for South Old Town Highway Department, and my son Bob works for Riverhead Town Highway Department. So,
Yes.
But Bob went to Eastern Kentucky University for like 4 years or so for fire and safety engineering, but it's very difficult, to get jobs in something like that, Although he is doing South Old Town Fire Marshal now, which is great. So it gives him something, to what he was doing.
Yeah.
So.
And what did I don't know if you said what your husband did for work?
Well, he worked for my father in the hardware store for many years. And then he went to East End Marine Supply, and he was doing phone sales there until he retired. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So because when I met him, he was working for Cablevision, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Because when he got out of the service, that's what he did.
And did you work for White's Hardware?
Oh, hell no. Can I say hell?
Yeah.
Oh, hell no. All right. Because, all right, you tell me. All right, so you have your mother, your father, right? Your husband, your brother, and sometimes my kids would work there. Why would I want to do that?
You wouldn't want to be there.
No.
Be 24 hours, 24/7.
Family. No. That was enough. No. So I never did. No, I didn't. I managed Chap's Corner and Renee's in Mattituck for many years, and then my most recent jobs, I worked for Brian on physical therapy for about 18 years, and I really enjoy that.
Nice.
But I did, 74, time to retire, so. And, so.
No, but then I just was curious, because even going through the 70s and 80s, could you describe?
So cool. And I had the chance to go, I was a different kid though. I could have gone to Woodstock with my boyfriend at the time, because he went and he said, "Let's go." We're going with a bunch of guys. Everybody piling into the Volkswagen. Because it was like a flower child time.
Yeah.
And I was all in bell bottoms and love beads and all that stuff. But I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I just couldn't do it, and it would have been an amazing experience. But the 70s were fun. But I know in other places it wasn't so fun.
Yes.
Because there was a lot of, but it didn't touch us here really that much.
I think it was more the inner cities.
Yeah, thank God. I'm so happy that it didn't, because we kind of escaped all that. Because I watched these programs when I was a kid, we used to go on these car trips. My father, twice a year. And so we'd get in the car, and we'd go, and he'd usually like to take us to places like, we'd go to Washington, we'd go to Gettysburg, we'd go to, just little places where we could get a little bit of an education. But we'd go down south a lot. And this was like in the late 50s, and it was shocking to me. Mm-hmm. I just couldn't, because we didn't have it here, to see how prejudice and certain bathrooms and certain, hotels and certain restaurants and stuff that people weren't allowed to go in. And I just thought it was the worst thing ever, so I did have to experience some of that. Just luckily we could get in the car and come home, get away from it. You know what I mean? But I know there was so much of it, but I don't, I'm not saying we didn't have, there was KKK out here back in the day.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I could tell you a funny story, because my grandfather, I heard this story from my grandfather. I guess they were having a rally. This had to be probably I'm going to say probably 40s.
Okay.
And they were marching up 3rd Street or whatever with the hoods and all this stuff, incognito. And my grandfather was alongside of the, watching them or whatever. And I don't remember what the guy's name was, but I'm just going to make up a name. So as they walked by, because they didn't want anybody to know who they were, my grandfather goes, "Oh, hey, Pete, what's up?" Yeah, because he recognized his shoes. He had these fancy boots or whatever that he always wore, So it's like, he wasn't as incognito as he thought he was. So, so we definitely had situations out here, but
but not to the extent of the South, where we had the segregation and stuff.
No, thank God. We had one school. Everybody, you started downstairs. That's the way it used to be. It's not the way anymore. You started downstairs in kindergarten, and you worked your way up to the 3rd floor. Up until you graduated, and everybody just. But I don't know. We just didn't think about it.
Yeah.
we really didn't. And I'm glad we didn't. Because, our friends were our friends. We didn't care. We didn't care about, religion or any of that. You were what you were. You were just a person, But it was, I guess 70s were a pretty crazy time. And there wasn't a lot of drugs and stuff. It was really just starting when I was in school, probably the 60s, end of the 60s into the 70s. It was really just starting. So it wasn't like there were a few kids you knew were starting to, to do some drugs and stuff. And there was like, those are the ones you stayed away from,
But did they say why there was that kind of downturn at that time in the 70s where you started seeing some more abandoned buildings, or I guess even going into the 80s? They don't really say exactly.
There are people that will say, oh, thank God we got here to save Greenport, because it was just so awful. Maybe I'm just not wanting to see it like that. I don't know, but
But you didn't see it like that.
Well, you know what? Because I guess maybe it didn't directly affect me because my father always had a thriving business. But there were stores and stuff that closed, but I can't even remember what the stores were.
Yes.
A dry cleaners maybe, and I'm just trying to remember. I'm trying to look at the buildings in my mind's eye, but I don't know what would have really caused that. We had a big fishing industry here at one time. A lot of boats would come in, and let me tell you, that was the best thing, because when those guys would come into dock, okay, yes, it helped my father, but the grocery stores, these guys would get about 4 guys with grocery carts, and you'd see them coming back from A&P, walk into the boats with just piled up with meats and food, so that was a big boon to that. The restaurants,
Mitchell's and...
Yeah, Mitchell's. But even so after my twins were born, because we were all poor, we didn't have any money. My husband worked, but we didn't have much money. But we, so when he would come home from work, like at 6:00, when the boys were about 4, and he was okay, he could take care of them. Then he couldn't take care of them when they were too little. And then I would go and waitress, a few nights a week just for the extra money. At Rumline, that was the original Rumline when Bob Copus, that is where Andy's is now.
Yes.
And that was like the best seafood place. And they had he used to have sides of beef hanging in the cold room that he'd butcher his own meat. it was a really awesome place.
Wow.
But anyway, so I started working down there a few nights a week. When those boats would come in and those guys would come in off the boats, the tips were just, oh my gosh, because they were just so, they'd eat because they wanted steak. They didn't want any seafood, because they had enough of that. But it was a boon to everybody when the boats would come in. Then they'd have to buy clothes. They'd buy some jeans. And Arcade had all kinds of work clothes and things in there that you could buy, and then there were other stores also that opened, that sold things like that. The Workhorse was one store that we had that you could go in and buy, but I don't know why they all went belly up. I really don't.
Yeah. And do you remember the Mitchell fire?
Oh, I do. Oh, that was awful. Yeah, that was awful. I remember Mitchell's because when I was a kid, and so my uncle Albert Matosha, they didn't have any children, and he was in the Rotary, and he was the supervisor and stuff. So they would have the Rotary would have these father-daughter banquets and things like that. So he would bring me, and I can remember just eating in Mitchell's and, and what a cool place it was. And then ladies' nights, which were dinners that the fire department would have, these ladies' nights, and we used to go to Mitchell's. For dinner there, or Porky's was another one. We had couple really, really good restaurants,
Yes.
And and that fire was just tragic. And all the boats that used to dock down there, it was
kind of just an empty.
Then they opened up a little nightclub there, Kokomo's or something, and that didn't work out really well. But I did for a little while, I guess.
Yeah.
But the park is beautiful. I'm really glad that it's a place, where people can go and look at the water, because that's a problem now. I mean, there's not many places where we can go and look at the water anymore.
No, it's a lot of off limits and stuff.
Exactly, you know, and too much building and condos and this kind of thing. And, you know, it's like, so, yeah. No.
Was that even, I guess, into the 90s, you started seeing some more changes with development or...
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the 90s. That's when my boy, that's when my boys graduated from high school. I guess. I think that's probably when things started, coming. Mm-hmm. You know, but now it's just a little out of control.
Yes.
You know, I mean, housing prices and stuff are just incredible. I even brought that up at that meeting last night. You know,
just even from the 2000, even just from a few years ago.
Oh, from a few years ago. The house that my parents bought, okay, it's got, it's a big old house. It's got a big barn in the back with an upstairs in the barn. It's got a nice piece of property. It's 4 bedrooms. One of the bedrooms was the maid's quarters. We didn't have the maid, but that's what it was for. You go down a couple of steps, and then it's the room, and then there's a back staircase, so the maid wouldn't disturb the rest of it. We used to call it the pit because that's what kids call it. So anyway, so it's that, and then downstairs there's, I don't know if they called it a parlor, but there's a front. We called the front room, and that's where us kids, we watch television. We always hung out in that room. There's a dining room. There's a big living room, the kitchen, and then another room off the back of the house. So, I mean, there's a lot of rooms in that house. I think my parents paid like $14,000 for the house. But then they had to kick in an extra $500 for the furnishings. I mean, can you imagine every room in that house? I mean, the dining room sets, the bedrooms, it's full of like brass beds and iron beds and all these, you know, and they paid extra $500 for that. You know, I bought my house when we were first married, and that was in the 70s, and it was a small house, but we paid $18,000 for it, you know, and then, you know, eventually added on. But and then all of a sudden, and I'm like, why is my house worth $800,000 now? It's really not any different, you know? You know, it's like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not complaining, but I'm not selling either. I get phone calls every day.
Yeah.
You know,
and we have seen some people that have had to leave, or locals that I guess.
Oh, it's so sad. Yeah. See, I was very fortunate because my one son Everett and his wife. He married a Clark. So again, natives marrying natives. Yes. He married Melissa Clark, and the Clark family's been here forever. And anyway, so when Ev and Melissa got married, the house next to her aunt, it was one of those reverse mortgages, and it was just this. Poor, you know, the family was fairly poor. Nobody could afford to pay that off. So Ev and Melissa were able to get that house at a really good price, you know, and then again, they had to add on to it because it was small, but so that enabled them to be able to stay here. And then my son Bob and his wife, because now the Kioski house, and they're like, off of Porky's parking lot, like right up there. They've had that house for, centuries, you know, the family. But again, the mother was by herself, really couldn't afford to pay the taxes to keep it up. You know, so they were able to help with that. And then, you know, when the mother passed away and all that. So they were able to stay here because they ended up, when they first got married, my son Bob and his wife, which, you know, they moved to Connecticut. And they bought this great house right in Ledyard, which is right off the boat. It's like 15 minutes, 10 minutes off the boat. So it's close. But I mean, they paid like hardly anything for it. And it was a ranch, and it had 3 bedrooms, a den, big piece of property, beautiful house. You know, so how could they not?
Yeah.
But then luckily things, you know, turned, you know, with the mother. And so, because they did want to come back.
Yeah.
You know, so they were able to come back. But if you don't get a break like that, your family's not going to be able to stay here. You know, and it's unfortunate because there was a little house in my street on the corner, and it's just 1 story. It was just a little cottage thing. And it went into a bidding war because, and there's no property or anything. But so by the time they finished, I mean, the house went for $900,000. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And I'm nowhere near the water or anything. I mean, I'm within walking distance of the village, which is nice. Yeah. But really? But this is what's happening, and they're coming out with cash and all that. Yeah. So, hey, I mean, I God love them. I mean, I know I don't blame them for for wanting to be here. Yes. And that's fine. But I think that people who are just using Greenport as a cash cow, in the sense of you just buy a house so that you can Airbnb it all the time, and I have no intention of living there. I just want to use it to make money. That bothers me, because then there are no houses for people to live, and
it takes away from a community.
Exactly.
People living here year round, and people complain about it being if it's more empty in the winter.
But again, I mean, if I was raising my kids now, I mean, because, I mean, I knew everybody on the street, and I had a small street, but I knew everybody on the street when my boys were growing up, and I could let them go out and play. But I mean, now I know, houses, I don't know anybody.
Or the empty part of a lot of the year.
Yeah, and you don't have all the neighborhood kids running around outside and stuff. You don't see that at all anymore. That's worrisome.
Yeah.
But Greenport's it's a great place. I mean, I love where I live. I love my history. Mm-hmm. I was very fortunate. I thank God every day, how fortunate I am, just with my family and all that. So, I mean, just to be able to, I've said that I was born here. And that's the thing, people go, oh, I'm a local, or you're a local. But there's a difference. See, a native is someone that was born here. So I'm a native.
Yes.
A local, you could move here and be here for 5 minutes. You're a local. You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah.
So I think there's got to be a little definition. Not that it matters. We should all just be the same.
No, but even with Billy Blind.
Bill, he's so funny. Yeah.
He's like, I'm not a local.
I've only been here for 70 years. Right, exactly. Which, I always assumed, but,
But, I mean, he gets where people are coming from.
Oh, yeah.
With that.
Yeah. So. No, Bill's a good guy. He's funny. Yeah. And then his family, had that business for a long time, and, they're still doing it,
And could you also talk about, because how long did White's Hardware go for?
Well, from 1933 until 1991.
Okay.
It was, and then my father did sell the business to someone that did run a hardware store for a while, but it just didn't work out for them.
But at that point, he was
retired.
Like, I don't want to do.
Yeah, and and it's like my boys and my husband were like, we might want to keep it going, but you couldn't, for two reasons. One reason, I felt that my father deserved to get whatever he could get for that store, and he wasn't going to get it from us, not because we wouldn't want to, but because we weren't able to. And I think he would have made concessions for us, and plus he would never really be out of it, because he'd always be if the family had it, he'd still be in it. You know what I mean? So that was one reason. And the other reason is Lower Main Street, forget about it. You can't. I mean, years ago, you'd go down, you could park, and you'd go in, you get your 5 gallons of paint, you could put it in your car, go home, or, the guys from the village, everybody just ran in there, grabbed what they need. You can't park down there. You can't, there's no way you can do, that's why you have to have a walking business. You can't have a business where you really need your car.
Yes.
And luckily with the store, it has the alley. And that's one of the only businesses that has, and that alley is owned 6 feet, the store, and 6 feet on the other side. It's not, it's not a public access alley that, everybody thinks it is. It's not. So she's able then to have people pull in, drop their dogs off, and then, you know what I mean? So that's a big asset right there.
Yeah.
Because that's a problem. So that's why you could never, in this day, no, there's no way you could ever do a hardware store or anything again. Because my boys would have liked to have done that.
Yeah. Because, people have talked about, I wish Greenport had a hardware store again. But
I know. And it was just great, to be able to run in and get what you needed,
Yeah.
Just a light bulb.
I know.
God, sometimes you can find a light bulb in IGA, but I don't know. It's tough.
It might be double the price.
Well, I'm not even going to go there.
We don't.
No, we're not going there. But yeah, no. So, yes, the tourism, and everybody, it's so great for the economy.
Yeah.
So many people out here. But answer me this. Is it helping the residents?
Mm-hmm.
If it is, how? How is it helping the residents, really?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And I mean, I'm not,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying. I mean, they keep saying that all the time. It's so wonderful, wonderful to have all these people I have. But yeah, hopefully it's helping the businesses. But the poor residents who can't even park in front of their houses.
Just this past Memorial Day weekend. I didn't go out.
I stay away on the weekends. Isn't that awful? I stay away on the weekends. I don't go and enjoy because I can't. I get too aggravated. I get a little too. So I know enough. I know what to do, and it's don't go down there. But and that's like I say, it's all well and good, but how the people that live like close to the village? I mean. They can't even get to their own homes. They can't have company come over because there's no place for them to park.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to get a haircut on Saturday. I don't know. I have to walk down there because there's no way I'm going to be able to, park anywhere on a Saturday. Oh, forget it.
Yeah.
And that's the unfortunate part.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah.
Well, the answer is no more hotels in the village, but other than that,
Yeah, because we're so focused on a tourist-centric economy type thing, but in terms of for the locals and everything, that doesn't really help us, and for locals to live out here too.
It's hard, it is. We do have to deal with a lot, and if you really looked into it, I think you'd be surprised how many business owners do not live in Greenport. So it's like but good for them. I mean, I wish everybody well, but. It doesn't help the average resident, but I don't know. I guess it's good. I don't know what to say.
I know. It's tough.
Because you can't wish away or go back.
Yeah. Because I do ask people what do you miss anything about the way Greenport used to be?
Yeah, a lot.
There's a lot of things that you can.
That you could just go and pull up in front of the drugstore and get your pills, or go to the post office and get your mail. I mean, it's like you can't do any of those. If I have to go to IGA, I go at 7:00 in the morning, 7:30. But now everybody else is discovering that too. So, but I mean, it's the only way I can park.
Yes.
Because I can't park. So you do have to kind of alter your life a bit. Where years ago, but I feel like those really old people that go, and I probably am one of those old people, and go, oh, back in the day, everything was so wonderful. But you know what? It probably wasn't. We're just thinking it was, I don't know.
No, I mean, I feel like there can always be things that were nicer about that time period, but obviously there's always progress, so we have to keep moving forward.
Right. And there's always, things that aren't good and are good about anything. I mean, there's the pros and the cons of everything. And I'm sure there's a lot of, cons and stuff, but I don't know. It just, I just always felt like I was blessed to be a child of the 50s, because I think after the war, after World War II seemed like the nicest time to grow up. People just were different. They weren't, they were just a little calmer, I think. And like I say, you had your mother at home, she didn't have to work, so you had more of a family oriented. And I think that's something that's important,
Yes.
I mean, and living out here, we only had like two television channels because you couldn't get anything. You got 8 and 3. So people wonder why I'm a Red Sox fan and a Celtics fan, because that's all we had, you know? I mean, you only got Connecticut channels, you know? You couldn't get New York channels. You didn't know anything about what was going on out west. Everything was to the north of us.
More connected with New England.
But it's true, because that was the television that we got.
Yes.
You know, because you had that antenna that you'd have to go up on the roof and turn it and all that. But, you know, you had the little thing on the back of the, and it turned the antenna for you. But that was, you know, before Cablevision came here. Mm-hmm. You know, that's what we had. And you know, so it was a very simple life. You only had 2 channels. You didn't have to worry about those 150 channels. There's nothing to watch anyway.
Now it's just, you're overloaded with these channels that there's nothing really good to watch.
And you still can't find anything to watch. I mean, you know, yeah. You know, so it's funny because I go back to watching the old Perry Masons that I used to watch on the old, you know, 8 and 3. Yes. But, oh my gosh, it's so funny. Yeah. But that was, you know, that was the simpler life.
Yeah.
You know, this just simpler.
And even I think we've touched on it. We've already touched on it a bit, but just looking ahead, what would you hope for the future of the North Fork? And I mean, the future of even Greenport and its community down the line?
Well, you know, I hope that things level out a little bit. You know, I can't even say to make it affordable, because I don't think you're going to see that anymore. But, you know, I just hope there's not going to be any radical changes. You know, I mean, just preserve our, you know, I'd love to see more fishing boats come in. I mean, Greenport was always a working community. Yes. I mean, and you smelled the fish. And my grandfather used to say, it's a smell of money. You know, yes. People now, if you get any kind of, oh my God, because we used to have processing plants here. You know, you had Coopers, you had, you know, sheltering. I mean, we had a, you know, and
people would be complaining about the smell.
About the smell. Exactly. You know, so, but I mean, just like to see industry like that come back again. I mean, we've got this beautiful, deep water port and stuff. Yeah, I'd like to see that utilized a little bit more, you know, and just generally just be nice and don't be doing U-turns on Front Street and stuff like that. And don't double park. Just because you put your blinker on doesn't mean it's legal. You know, yes. Put your four-way flashes on doesn't mean it's legal to park yes. anywhere you want. No, that's all. You know, I just don't want it to get any more. I don't want to progress too much more. It's too much. Yeah. It's I think we've got an overload.
Yeah, it's gotten I think even since COVID, it's gotten a little out of hand.
Well, yeah, people came out, and, you know, I don't begrudge anybody for wanting to be here. I understand that, you know, because especially if you lived in, you know, maybe in the city where it's all hot and whatever, you know, I mean, they should come out here and it's not, but just be nice. You know, if somebody's walking on the beach and they're just walking past your house, don't call the cops. It's okay. They're just walking. They're not hurting your sand. You know, just little things. You know, if the kids are, you know, swimming somewhere, just be nice. That's all I can say.
I know.
You know, I mean, oh, man. I mean, now we can't even use the leaf blower, but whatever.
I know. I know, that's another thing.
Oh, man, I know. I mean, you know, it's like, oh, you can't mow your grass on Sundays. My father worked 6 days a week, and they had a big, beautiful yard, and my father worked himself to death keeping, and Sunday was the only day he could do it, you know? So don't, you know, oh, my gosh. Yeah. But, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it goes back to the old thing. Oh, I love it out here so much. I'm going to move out here and change everything. You know? Yes. You just don't do that. Just come out and enjoy it. You know, live with us. And, you know, because I don't like that us against them thing. You know, I don't like that. You know.
They feel, or people feeling the need, they got to change it.
No,
out here because of what they
have to have a YMCA. We have to have more of this, more. Do we really? We have water all around us. You know, it's fine. But I'm just saying, just come out and enjoy what's here, you know? And I'm proud to be called a leftover, you know? I mean, because that, you know, that's the nickname that we got, which is fine with me. I don't care. I mean, I'm happy that I am a leftover, and I'm not going anywhere.
No. Nope.
Nope. Kicking and screaming. Only, you know, when I get carried out. You know, that's it. Oh, my gosh.
Definitely. Were there any other major events that you remember that stick out to
yeah.
you? We touched on the Mitchell fire, but other big events.
Well, this was something that we used to have. We used to have a summer playhouse, and it's right where well, it would be just go up Front Street and keep going straight, and you'd run right into it, right where Sweet and Indulgence's was.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be these troops of actors, and I mean, I'm talking like some of them were probably like famous actors and stuff, and they'd come and they'd put up a big tent,
mm-hmm.
and they would put on shows. They'd put on, I guess, like a Broadway show or whatever the heck they would do in these tents. And I remember that as a kid, going to these things, and they were the coolest things ever. I mean, people don't realize that we had that. And I found a picture of it. Yeah, Summer Playhouse it was called. So there was a lot of neat things like that used to go on, in the summer. And then of course, and then they used to always, but they can't do circuses anymore, but they used to have the circuses, and they used to have circus parades. And it would be, they'd go all on the street, and I found pictures of that too, of the circus parades, which was kind of, the kids would go crazy, to see, they'd be marching the elephants and the clowns and the whatever and all this, and they'd have the tiger in this big cage on wheels that they'd pull and all that kind of thing, I mean, so there was a lot, it was kind of cool. We had a lot of stuff like that. And they actually did play polo on the polo grounds.
Mm-hmm.
And they did, they did do that. I'm trying to think some of the really old stuff. No, I don't remember any of that, because that was
there like a
before my time.
Like a horse track?
There was a horse track, but it was
further
west. Where was it? Was it McCann's? By McCann's? I forget. But yes, they did have a horse track. But now I don't know where. Carlos would know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where that was. I can't remember. I remember hearing about it.
Maybe that area where they called it West Dublin or...
Oh, yeah, they all had their own different little names. Yeah. Well, Germantown and this and that. Yeah,
the street used to be called...
Germania Avenue. Yeah, that was... well, then they had Railroad Avenue, Germania Avenue. Yeah, I have a lot of really old maps that... show those old streets, and it's kind of cool. Yeah, Fifth Avenue, I think, was something else too, but I can't remember right now. But that was. Then they changed the names of those.
Yeah.
But the Summer Playhouse, I remember, was a pretty cool thing. These actors would come out from who knows where, and
No, but I think that was good. But I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast today and share your story, and really, it was nice of you to share all this information about.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Just thinking back, and I'm sure there's a million other things, but
it's hard to.
It is, and I appreciate what you do, because I think it's important.
Yes,
I really do. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 152 with Marilyn White Corwin. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.